Welcome, everybody. I'm Harry Cooper, Senior Curator of Modern Art at the National Gallery of Art. And I'm here with Ed Ruscha, as you can see, who is simply one of the world's great artists. I don't think he needs too much more introduction. We are doing a Diamondstein Spielvogel lecture or discussion. And I should say that this series provides a forum for distinguished artists to discuss the genesis and evolution of their work in their own words. Dr. Barbara Lee Diamondstein Spielvogel and the late Honorable Carl Spielvogel generously endowed this series to make such conversations available to the public. And I know Barbara Lee is with us, and she's been hoping and trying for years to get Ed Ruscha on board, and we've succeeded in doing that. So I know we have hundreds of people out there, more than we could fit in our auditorium, which is the silver lining to this situation that we're in. And I'm just delighted to be here with Ed. It's kind of a cliche to say that he defies category, but it's true. So I'll just say it. He is and he is not a California artist, a conceptual artist, a neo-Dadaist, a neo-surrealist, a word artist, you name it. And he works in just about every medium except maybe sculpture. I'm not sure there are any sculptures out there. We'll have a lot to talk about, maybe 50 images or so to look at. And so I'm just delighted to be here with you, Ed. Welcome.
All right. Happy to be here. And when people ask me, do you know Harry Cooper? I say, yes. And the first thing I remember is that Harry drove to my studio out here in LA and got stopped by the police and cited for not wearing his seatbelt. So I take it by now, that was 10 years or so ago. I take it that he's learned his lesson. And we can move on with a seatbelt on.
I did. I think I got a ticket too, and the trooper never took off his mirrored sunglasses. It was just a classic LA experience. But I was very happy to go out there to see your studio on Electric Avenue, and I've actually been out there again to Culver City at least once too. So it's been great getting to know you a little bit over the years, and having the privilege of writing about your work, but we've never really sat down and talked. So we get to do that. And right. We had a little pre-talk and thought about where to go, and I will share my screen. And as I was thinking about this, I thought back to the last time Ed was here, which was 2005. When the National Gallery hosted his retrospective exhibition of drawings, and Ed did a great solo talk at that point. And I remember you started with the gear shift of the Ford and the Chevy, and which is great, and talked about your aesthetic and your work. So I didn't just want to repeat all of that, and I thought maybe we could pick up where we left off in 2005, because that was a big year in not only for that drawing retrospective, but later that year, summer into the fall, you were the artist representing the United States at the Venice Biennale. And I sort of had a front row seat to that, because my colleague at Harvard was Linda Norden, who curated that along with Donna DeSalvo. And here's a picture of that pavilion and the sign out front. So, that, I guess, put us in mind of thinking about time passing. And you said to me a couple of times the phrase passage of time. So I thought, let's make that our mighty topic, the passage of time. And we'll work through a few different aspects of that: empire, nation, and culture, the built environment, art and its materials, language, art history and your career as it has changed. And we're looking at this wonderful drawing, which you donated to the National Gallery in 2007. And I'm not just putting it up here as a fun config, but I wonder if you could reflect back on making that, and if you want to say anything about that one.
It evolved like I guess everything evolves, and working with these topics and working with these words, and I guess it just comes down to the basic activity of picture making, and I would choose these subjects like words and objects and gas stations and various other subjects as kind of picking them out of the air and messing with them and making something out of them. So I guess that's the way these things evolve and come to be.
This one I think is a little unusual in that it has the same words in a couple of different treatments. We've got the, I think what you call the Boy Scout Utility Modern font that you invented in white, and then something sort of filmic and old-fashioned looking behind it.
That was done so long ago, I forgot what's behind it, but
I mean, I just mean Mighty Topic gets repeated twice.
Yeah, I had that thought to do that, and I wanted something that that jumps out at you and then also stays in the background. So I guess I was trying to make both of these word groupings almost so they're like on the same plane, but easy to look at and difficult to look at the same time. So that's picture making to me.
Yeah. Well, we're glad to have it here, and there's always interesting space in your paintings that looks flat and then it's not flat and then it is flat again, and so much to look at. So I mentioned the Venice Pavilion that you filled with 10 paintings, and for that commission, you took 5 paintings from the early 90s and then reinterpreted them, right? And we'll just look at a couple of examples here, and if you want to reminisce a little bit about what you were doing here.
I guess this whole thing grew out of my surprise visit to the New York Historical Society, where I discovered the Thomas Cole paintings called Empire.
Right, the Course of Empire.
Course of Empire. And every time I go to New York, I would visit those paintings, never really having any thought that it might motivate me to do to take a similar track in thinking. But in the early 90s, I painted these black and white pictures that I call blue collar paintings, and a series of 5 of those paintings. And they were all done in black and white. And I guess I was just in kind of a mood then, and thinking, all along that I was admiring Franz Klein's commitment to just work in the colors of black and white, although he used other colors too, but his predominant thrust in his work was to work in black and white. And so I felt sort of cozy with his thoughts when I did these, that maybe black and white and gray would be the way to exercise this kind of thinking in in moral terms and in observing the world. And so these paintings came to be mostly 1992. And then as time passed, I considered these paintings as a group, and then the thought occurred to me to update these images, and it became a sort of force in my work, and that eventually worked itself into the idea of passage of time and cultural comments, what have you, to make these things kind of jive together. Then it became, I think about the same time I was invited to the Venice Biennale, and this whole thing began to occur to me, though maybe I should stay on this course and ride this storm out and make something of it. And so that's how these paintings came to be.
That's so interesting that you mentioned Franz Klein, who did, I think, grow up in a pretty industrial setting in Pennsylvania, and might have related to these works. But of course, he used the big brushes and the big brush strokes, and it's pretty hard to find any brush strokes in your work except for the early years.
Well, I let him handle the bravado of all the big brush strokes, and I hunkered down on these and worked slow and carefully, I guess. But I was very influenced by his work, and I don't know how they really translate to my way of thinking, but they do, sort of backdoor influence. And he was one of many people who I woke up to and began to appreciate.
And that was early on that you found his work.
Early on in the early 60s, and when I was in art school.
Okay, how about the next slide? Thank you. There's another one, and this one is really really striking in that you've invented some characters there at the bottom left and some graffiti on the bottom right.
Yeah, the graffiti is difficult to see, but it is there, and it sort of emulates street graffiti that you might find in any city in the world, really. And so I had this clean-cut version of Techno America with tools and dye, and thinking that was almost like an abstract slab of granite, but and it was really what it is a factory. And but I like the abstract quality of it, that it's so blocky. And then the redo, I imagine that this All-American institution goes out of business, and the building sits in the same place and is taken over by other people. And I began seeing a lot of Korean signage here in Los Angeles, in Japanese, Chinese, and I would emulate this in not really meaning anything. So it does not translate to anything. And I've asked Koreans to look at this and say, did I say anything here? Or did I say something bad or good? Or what am I saying here? And they look at it and say, you're not saying anything. So it's mumbo jumbo contained within this slab of granite, I guess, this building that still remains, but it gets attacked at in two different ways. It gets the modernization and the change of cultural identity, And then it's been attacked by kids with paintbrushes and graffiti on the right-hand side of this. So that's a bit of time passage.
Yeah. And I imagine you had fun doing the characters in the graffiti, which is outside of your usual comfort zone, maybe.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Sorry.
I felt like maybe I was invading somebody's known territory, and that maybe I could have said something here on either side of this picture that could have been condemning and really something I shouldn't be talking about. But so it's all invention, and it's like playing with frivolous ideas, but kind of riveting them to some cultural connection to the world.
Mm-hmm. And the graffiti is also invented, improvised?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Figurines in here that are actually taken from buildings that I saw in downtown LA.
I'm sorry, there are some elements taken from
elements that are actually gathered together, and some of them are do really exist or did then on the backs of buildings and on the faces of buildings in downtown LA.
Mm-hmm. I love the sky in this one, by the way. It's beautiful kind of a layer of colors there. It's interesting you said, mumbo jumbo and it doesn't communicate anything, because I think you've said in the past that you're not interested in communication, even though you use a lot of words.
Well, I mean, the communication is automatically there no matter what I do. If I just take the letter Y and put it in a picture, it begins to say something to someone, but I'm not, my audience is very vague, and I don't really know who my audience is. And so it has to start with me and making these things. Sometimes it's just like in my own sandbox, playing with ideas, and then they become official by me making something out of them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I saw a comment, the graffiti isn't showing up. It's at the very bottom right. I'm sorry, it's a little hard to pick out there. Let's look at the next slide. So this was another pair from the commission, but a very different one, where the phone booth has disappeared completely and been replaced.
Yeah, I mean, the top of the telephone booth was actually a city fixture all over the city in 1992. And then the idea that it's completely gone by today's standard, or by 2005 standard, that it gets replaced with something. And so there's a bit of a sycamore tree on the right, and a signpost on the left, or a light post on the left.
Yeah, I see people are saying in the chat that the images look cut off, maybe at the bottom. I don't know if we can do anything about that, but of course, these images are already cut. They're cropped. The whole composition suggests that something has been cut. The viewpoint is unusual. So if you can see the word telephone, you're seeing that whole image on top. And hard to say where the bottom one should end. But I guess if you can't see the caption, if you can see the caption, then you can see the whole image. Okay, next slide. So here we go again with the Thomas Cole Course of Empire. It's a series of 4 paintings. I just picked the first and the last one for dramatic impact, I guess. And you talked about these a little bit. We also have our own cycle of 4 Thomas Cole paintings at the National Gallery. shall we go to look at that, or did you want to say anything about these a little more?
Well, these are two of the paintings that Thomas Cole did, which showed this massive civilization changing before your eyes and over a grand period of time. And like I say, I stumbled onto these paintings, not really knowing much about them. And I began just looking at this painting before I even checked who this man's name was. And then realizing what he had done with this series of works. And I just thought that, and after reading about his life, he was someone that didn't like to see much change happening. And he was born in England, came to the United States early on in 1830 or so, and he finally became the dean of this school of landscape painters. And but he had a real message, I find. I mean, a deeper message than most of the artists who were just painting frozen ideas and frozen scenes. This is someone who has taken a scene and pushed it further and pushed it further, and then it becomes a historical recognition that here we finally have a civilization that's crashed down upon itself. And so I just found myself visiting this series of paintings every time I'd go to the New York Historical Society. Sometimes they'd be gone on tour. And I even thought, well, maybe that's good, because then people will see these paintings. And somehow it dovetailed with what I was doing at the time. And then I'm doing similar things that he was doing, but in my own twisted way.
Yeah, well, I noticed that just as you have the buildings repeated in the two versions, he has the same mountain going throughout the series. You can see it. It's on the left in the top one and on the right in the bottom one. So would you say that your series for Venice is about the decline and fall of America, of the US?
Yeah, I think it shows some drastic changes from a period of time when things were kind of settled in, and then they just well, you see it in everything. You see it in industrial design when you go through and look at all the different designs of automobiles throughout the years, and then you see the development of the automobile, how it stays very much the same, but then it's very different in lots of ways, mostly in its mechanics. But it's a metaphor for what's happening here too, I think.
Yeah. Okay, next slides. And here are, again, two scenes from our somewhat later Cole cycle, The Voyage of Life. And I chose the first and the third here, childhood and manhood. And I guess I chose manhood because I just love that idea of what manhood, or, sorry for the sexism there, but what adulthood might be like, which is a poor soul with his hands clasped as he's about to go over the waterfall. So I can relate to that sometimes. Maybe a few of us can.
I guess this is a series of 4 paintings, is it? Or
yes, again, it's 4 paintings.
Yeah, and I didn't really know about this. I didn't know much about this. I mean, I built everything that I revered about Thomas Cole's work on the course of empire, and his attitudes that surrounded it, and they were very much based on setting up a canvas in the wilderness and observing what you're seeing, and then altering it to a point where you inject your own imagination into it.
Mhm.
And so he's not just painting the trees as they exist out there. He's taking the trees and doing something else with them. And there's a lot of mystery attached to Thomas Cole's thinking, in that some of the images of his that he painted with rolling rivers, and the backgrounds are, people tend to see symbolism that maybe didn't really exist, but maybe did.
Mm. Okay, next slide's going to try to move a little faster. And okay, our second category is the built environment next. And first thing that came to my mind is the book you did. You did, I think, 17 different books over the years in the earlier part of your career, 60s and 70s. And I'm a proud owner of this copy here on the left, which still has the band around it, which is always a good collector's item. But in this case, you had a setup and drove in a pickup truck along the Sunset Strip, Sunset Boulevard in LA, and recorded what you saw.
Yeah, it's I was energized by the accelerated city I moved to from Oklahoma to Los Angeles. It was a big jump, and I began to just look at the central part of LA, essentially Sunset Boulevard, letting that be my guide stick. And I find myself going left to right, almost like a landscape. And I guess psychologists will say, well, a child begins to form his ideas about age 3 or 4. And, but I think I'm a late bloomer, because I didn't really come to my line of thinking until I was about 18 or 19. So I was slow to the picture, but I was thinking along these kinds of lines when I was about that age. And so it took me maybe 10 years to get myself together, and I had been introduced to a camera, and so I started taking photographs and things on the street, and the mechanical aspect of driving down the street and recording everything that's out there began to pretty much fascinate me. And it was almost like a ribbon, and then making a ribbon of paper in a accordion fold seemed to be logic to me. And so this book encompasses 2.5 miles of Sunset Boulevard, which is actually about 27 miles long, but this is only 2.5 miles of it, which they consider to be the Sunset Strip.
Yeah. And unfolded, it's 297 inches. And I recently learned a word, leporello, which is the Italian word for this kind of accordion book, which, as you say, it fits the subject so beautifully. The next slide. So I wanted to point people to this resource at the Getty at 12sunsets.getty.edu, where you and your team have redone these photographs over many years, I guess, in 12 different times. And when you go to this website, you can pick a car icon and drive along the strip. And as you do, you can choose your year and see exactly what's changed. And I got into this the other day, and it was amazing.
Yeah, so I photographed the Sunset Strip and Sunset Boulevard many times beginning in 1965, and I still continue to do it, finding it pretty interesting. A lot of it stays the same, a lot of it changes. And so as this archive went to the Getty, they began to see this as a bigger picture that could be compared. Buildings could be compared to one another over a period of time, and so they made a program out of this that's quite fascinating. So if you want to take Sunset Boulevard, all of its 27 miles, and have it show you all of the dry cleaning stores that happen to be on this street. You can push a button and find it. If you want to know all of the Presbyterian churches on Sunset Boulevard, press a button and you have it. So, and I think you can do the same with stop signs and any number of apps or choices. And so the story really goes on.
Yeah, that's fascinating that you can take that sort of a horizontal cut and look for different kinds of businesses, but you can also do a vertical cut where you just stop the car at one place and go through all of the years, and you'll see exactly what changed on that one street corner. So I recommend it. Next slide. And I just thought I'd pick out a couple of classic examples from our collection of photographers who have done something similar. On the left, Bill Christenberry, his Coleman's Cafe, which he went back to many, many years. You see 1967, 1993, and then it's collapsed in 1996. Or Nicholas Nixon's long series of photographs of the Brown sisters. One thing I wanted to ask you about is, these are works of art. These are the focus of these artists. Your Sunset Strip resource is it a work of art?
Well, I guess so. You can use that term loosely, but it's an investigation, sure, and investigations can be called art if you want to call it art, and I guess I do. I mean, it's part of my process, part of all of my daily activity. So I guess it's art. Yeah.
Okay.
Until somebody tells me it isn't, I'll fight for it.
Next slide. Now, this is something that you mentioned to me that you've become interested in. A book from 1965 called The Changing Mile, which was then revisited and updated. Do you want to tell people a little bit about this?
Sure. This is a book that I stumbled upon, just like the Thomas Cole paintings, and I saw that these were pictures taken mostly in Arizona and outside of cities. But all the photographs on the left-hand side of the pages were taken like 1860 to 1880, 1900, 1915. And then some archivists, some photographers, I forget who these people are, but they found the glass negatives that all these pictures made. And they were all made, I think, by one person, but it's some of the history is a bit sketchy, but they decided that this thing had enough value that they would find the locations of the camera, the way it was set up in 1870, and put the camera there in 1965 in the same location and take pictures of it and see the changing of time again. And so it becomes a fascinating thing. I mean, biologically, it's fascinating to just see the change of rock piles, the change of man-made walls, the change of trees and the absence of them and the new growth. And then the one on the right here, Changing Mile Revisited. This is another step in the whole thing, since the original book was done in 1965. Well, there's quite a bit of time that's passed since then in 2003. So there you have it again. And I think it might be the same people who developed this next
I
step.
see two of the names are indeed the same. Yeah. Thank you for that. Very, very topical, given that we're dealing with a lot of change in our environment. Next slide. So speaking of the built environment here,
Yeah,
the built or projected environment.
Yeah, well, it comes from my childhood, I think, and going to movie theaters and watching this thing on the screen. Although you wouldn't see the entire development from the lower right-hand corner to upper left, you would see just a fraction of that, almost like half of that. But you would remember the music that they pumped in on when they showed this for the opening of a movie. And it stuck with me, and I began to see it as a pictorial device that really grew out of, like I say, it grew out of movies, because I liked it in movies when they use this technique of, there has to be a time change between, let's say, a couple traveling on a train going from one city to the next. And it usually was captured by the train starting in the lower right-hand corner, way in the distance, and then the noise of the train and the advancing speed and the enlargement of the image, and pretty soon you'd have the entire screen filled with the engine and the cars that followed. So that was like a pictorial zoom effect that I wanted to get into a picture. And maybe I was also thinking, can I make a picture here that would be a picture, and also you can hear the music without actually hearing the music.
Great. Next slide. So I am really fascinated by these drawings in our collection, which you did, it looks like a year later, in which you took an image that was already about perspective and this angle, and you then treated that sheet to a variety of angles itself, which is a real brain twister.
Yeah, well, I guess I took the image originally that we looked at before, and I twisted it and began imagining this as being also pictorial, and but in a different vein. So these are examples of that, of taking something that's kind of dumb and frozen and then twisting it and making another picture, and then twist it again, another picture, twist it again.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where I resided when I did this in 1963.
Did you do this with some kind of projection, or were you able just to render it?
I think I used tricks and devices. I may have used a photograph or done something, and but of course made it by hand, but it's not made with anything else.
Got it.
Yeah.
Next slide. So you mentioned this Lumiere brothers film, famous short film of a train arriving at a station, I believe, as an inspiration for what you were just talking about, the that movie technique. And I wanted to show you this Charles Sheeler painting from our collection of sharply receding train tracks in an industrial landscape. I don't know if you know this painting, but you should know it.
I probably should know it. Don't really know it very well, but I do know his work.
Yeah.
And I see the drama that he's put into this thing, just like the one on the left. And my 20th Century Fox that I say grew out of my recollection of movies where they'd have modern trains. This is an old timey train here, but this, I think this picture right here is an example of something that would scare the daylights out of people when they saw it in a movie theater, which they did in 1895. And I think they're captured recordings of people almost going crazy looking at this thing. And I believe the train continues to move on because this is a movie. It's not just a frozen photograph. And so I guess, you know, we're so used to this kind of thing that it wouldn't be frightening today. But when it was made, it was a showstopper. Just like the cowboy who shoots a gun right into the middle of the screen, people ducked in their seats.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. And this popped into my head. It looks like 5 paintings by Saul Steinberg, which are receding in space, but in fact, this is a flat image of 5 shaped pieces of wood on which he's painted the illusion of these paintings receding in the distance. And he lived with this apparently in his apartment, and it's not very well known, and there's a Mondrian there at the end, and the second one in is Marcel Duchamp. So I know both of those artists are dear to you.
Okay. Yeah, no, I've never seen this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next. So another dimension of change is just in your work is the materials. Next slide. And this kind of says it all about that. This is a work of beet juice on wove paper. I guess the words are reserved. That's the paper, and the juice is everywhere else. I don't know if it's faded over the years or not, but it raises that question, which I guess is of real interest to you about how things last in your own work.
Yeah, I guess this is a extension of that. And I don't think this thing would have faded if it was kept in a drawer or kept in the dark. But, and so that's part of its innuendo, I guess. But it's just another excursion for me. And I got maybe a little weary of using powdered pigment and chalks and other colors. And maybe I was thinking I'll try some materials that will make colors and make marks, but are not of the conventional origin.
Yeah, yeah. Someone asked in the chat if you know or knew the Vogels, the collectors of
I
this.
did know them.
Yeah. They often bought directly from artists. I don't know if they came to you and or how they got this.
I don't think so. They may have gotten this from somebody else, like Leo Castelli or something. But they were very visible, and they would show up at all openings everywhere, no matter where they were. They would go to. They were very social, and I like that couple.
Yeah, they're very important to us, and we have a huge collection of their work, including this. Next slide. So we really do our best to preserve these works and keep them in the Solander boxes and keep the light levels low. But you really challenged us with this one. This is the Book of Stains from 1969. 75 stains on paper using various materials, which our collectors committee purchased under the direction of Judith Brody, our former Curator of Modern Prints and Drawings, 2013. Next slide. So some of these stains are barely visible and some of them are bolder and
Invisible.
stronger.
Some might even be invisible. I think there are some in there that are.
Yeah. Wonderful array of materials here. Is that a nod to Warhol, the urine, or had he done his?
No, as a matter of fact, I felt like I had to remove myself from the aesthetics of putting a mark on paper. So I gave the job to other people, and I hired some friends to make these. And I think it was a very kind of Saul LeWitt idea to leave it up to someone else with some vague rule about impregnating the general middle area of a paper or piece of paper with an image, and try not to be too self-conscious about it. All these things were done by other people, but it put me in sort of an index mode, and I wanted to make a folio of some kind. I don't know where it all came from, but it comes from books and pages and leaves of paper that present something different with each page. And literature is doing the same thing for you, isn't it? And so pages and books, and so it all kind of comes together in one motion.
Next slide. There's a few more. And the next slide. So I wanted to ask you, speaking of the fate of art and the fate of materials, about this moment where Bruce Nauman took your book, Various Small Fires, and burned it and created his own fold-out book called Burning Small Fires.
Well, you couldn't think that I wasn't flattered by this. And it happened a few years, I guess, about 4 years after my book. And it was actually, I don't know how I even got a copy of this, but I didn't even know Bruce then. So I didn't meet Bruce till maybe 1970 or something. And I don't think we ever really had a discussion of it or anything, but he, I liked the trajectory of his thinking here. And maybe I do a lot of the same kind of things myself when I'm riffing on what's happening out on the street, or if I borrow something from somebody, and it's that old idea that all art comes out of other art, and all of my art's the same way.
Well, I'm not surprised to hear that you liked it. It seems like a very smart and great tribute to you. Next slide. Maybe along the lines of the tribute that Rauschenberg paid to de Kooning when he got de Kooning to lend him a drawing in order to erase it. And 1953, sorry, I didn't put the date on there. And apparently de Kooning cooperated, and I think Rauschenberg felt that de Kooning had given him a very hard one to erase. This is out at SF MoMA. And then I just thought I'd reference Marcel Duchamp, who is the god behind a lot of this kind of work that has to do with the author retreating, maybe, and taking a pseudonym, and in fact delegating work to others, and playing with language too in this piece, Fresh Widow. So I'm sure you've seen versions of this. We have the original is at MoMA, and we have one of the editions.
All right. Yeah, I think when I view either of these works here, I look at the one on the left with the erased de Kooning, and I think he must have had a real convoluted urge to do something like this. And I thought, boy, that's almost sacrilegious, isn't it? But then the notion of it and the activity of it and the fact that it's made and placed in this thing we call a frame with a title underneath it adds another little element to it that is makes it certified. There's some with the symmetry of the image within the frame, and it's all just I began to really appreciate the idea of doing such a thing, and thought how great.
Yeah, that's interesting. I kind of feel two ways about it too, but I think it redeems itself. Yeah, with
1,000 times over. Yeah.
Pardon?
1,000 times over.
Yeah. Okay. Next slide. So language is something that you've traced and played with, and I just want to look at one example, which is one of the paintings in our collection on the right here, Lisp. And I thought, I'll look in the online catalog Resonate, which is a great resource of your work, and I was stunned to see how many iterations you did of this work. First, before the painting here in graphite, and with droplets, you can see, and without droplets. So, and our painting has some droplets in it, rendered too, hard to see, but lower right, just where the P kind of ends. Some gleaming droplets of spittle, I guess, is the idea.
I think that this kind of imagery evolved from this idea of long pieces of paper, and it almost goes back to my Sunset Strip book, and you could almost say, well, you must recognize the importance of a roll of toilet paper at the same time, but it's just I don't know. So I guess in my 20s when I did this, and most of these works I did were on paper, and I think the painting on the right is the only actual painting I've done using this imagery.
Yeah. Why is that? Did you sort of think about doing more paintings and
maybe
didn't feel like it, or
could have gotten so fatigued by making this that I thought I'm going to give myself a long rest.
Yeah. Well, looking at your work, I get tired thinking about how the labor of so many of these effects. Next slide. So some even earlier examples, I guess, before you got into the ribbon idea, just the idea of a cursive writing of it.
Yeah.
Where here on the left, the spittle is especially juicy. And the next slide. And then you sort of stuck with Lisp as one of several words that you subjected to your liquid word treatment, imagining the letters as puddles of liquid.
Yeah. It also, I guess I was always observant of what a tabletop looks like, and when things are dropped on a table, and seeing them at an odd angle, like an oblique angle, and somehow it came that I was working these ideas through, and these are clumsy examples, but these things move me from one place to another.
Okay, next slide. And there's a full-blown
Same here.
treatment in paint. Next slide. And the next slide. Back to work on paper. This time you a year or two later, you move from pencil to gunpowder, which you, I guess, dissolved and used as a medium. And I put lips in there because you can move letters around, and so I consider it an honorary member of the series.
Yeah, the gunpowder was discovered by accident, and I began using that over using graphite or even charcoal, because I mean gunpowder is charcoal, but mistakes were easier to correct, and I just began to like the speed of it and the use of it.
And there's a sense of danger about it.
Could be.
Next
It
slide.
happened one time. Yeah, I had a work sent back to me from Japan who wouldn't accept the work that I had done in gunpowder because they said it can't cross into the country because it's a volatile substance.
I'm going to move a little quickly, but before we leave Lisp, what was it about that word that led you to do so many versions?
Nervous energy, I think.
Okay. All right.
That's it.
Moving on. Our other painting here in the collection on the right, and which was preceded by this print on the left with some slightly different language, and then the next slide also preceded by another version in paint on the left. And we should probably keep moving, but I'll just note that our painting got quite a bit of notoriety when it was chosen to live in the White House during the Obama administration. And this very thoughtful and deliberative president had indecision over his couch. Next
As
slide.
I understand it, he looked at that painting and said, "Hey, that's me."
Really? That's great. So finally, just looking back, we've already talked about some of the artists who inspired you. You saw an exhibition of Jasper Johns and Kurt Schwitters in 1960 at the Ferris Gallery. And I think you were really taken with both artists. So I hope you like this little Schwitters. This is our only Schwitters on the left from our collection, a very constructivist kind of to style one. And then the famous Johns Target with four faces. You saw the black and white reproduction of these. And next slide, you then went on to make this this painting on the left, excuse me, in which you kind of, seems to me, put them together and put the word Schwitters in a very Johns-like way into a somewhat Johns-like field of color, and comparing it here to Johns's painting, Tennyson, on the right.
Yeah, it's all right there, isn't it? I mean, you can tell who I've been looking at.
Well, it's good to wear your sources on your sleeve, maybe especially when you're what? How old? Very young.
Sure.
Next slide. And this was a time when you were doing primarily paintings of single words, and those words were single syllables. But I picked out this unusual one on the left where you put four of the words from four different paintings together, showing it here with a work by Jasper Johns. That is the same but different. We could probably talk a good while about that.
Yeah, no, this is like a compilation work. And I began to recognize that artists were doing this and they were taking elements from their own playbooks and uh, assembling them into a single picture. And I like that idea of taking one thing and another thing and another thing from across the room. And there's one behind me and one in front of me. And then I take a little bit of this, and a little bit of that, and then you make a picture out of it.
Hmm. I love the fact that, in the same year, the two of you are doing something very similar, even with a similar palette, but with some very different goals, I think. And you're using language that appeals to you from the environment, and John's is thinking about signification of color words and philosophy and denotation, and they're both great paintings. Next slide. Another here very early painting of yours on the right, in which you one of your first word paintings were actually a name painting, playing with your name, and I'll let people figure that out. Just showing it here with a wonderful Rauschenberg Combine painting that is promised to the National Gallery from the Meyerhoff collection.
Yeah, it's a matter of taking things and messing with them. And I guess that's the life I was living then.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But I'm doing the same thing today.
Next. I mentioned Duchamp before, and here's the large glass from the Philadelphia Museum. I don't know if you ever looked at the notes that he compiled on the large glass. I picked out the sheet here about the chocolate grinder, which is the object at lower center that looks a little like a some kind of mill or a circular carousel.
Yeah, it's the puzzling aspect of his work that really attracted me. And I could see things that were completely unconventional picture making that this man introduced into his work. And he introduced some kind of awkwardness and bewilderment that I didn't need explanations for. I just saw pictorially these things are powerful. And he managed to open up a Pandora's box of his own making, and he put these elements in here in crazy ways that are not usually associated with proper picture making. I mean, you don't find the symmetry of a Greek vase in here. You don't. I mean, these are like oddball musings that all come together in a picture, and they're luxurious. There's lots of open space and there's everything here, but it's the bewilderment of the elements that really are powerful to me. So for that reason, you can't explain it. And I sort of gloss over with the many books and attempts to explain his work. And I get a little drowsy of that because I do it from a visceral level when I look at his work and say, this guy is just, you can't say anything about it. It's just the elements speak for themselves.
Yeah. And even the notes, quote unquote, that he
notes
wrote down,
yeah,
they don't help either. But I'm very impressed that you've delved into the massive Duchamp literature, and I don't know where you find the time.
And rejected
it. Yes, as did our friend Yvan Lambois, who thinks the same way about much of that. Next slide. Here's his painting of the chocolate grinder from an earlier point in his career that he picked up again. And I was just looking at this, and the angle he takes on it, the precision of the rendering, the and the way that shadow moves really in a strong way to the left. And it made me think of the next slide, your famous painting, LA County Museum on Fire. But maybe it has more to do with the absurdity of the image. I don't know.
Well, I took a helicopter ride over Los Angeles back then, probably about 65, 64, 65. And I could see things from an oblique angle, and I began to appreciate architecture for that same thing. And I mean, I see a lot of my Course of Empire paintings maybe relating to this painting. And do we have an example of that Ophelia painting?
Yeah, I think that's next. Yep.
Look at that. All right. See, so I would visit this painting likewise at the Tate Britain in London, and I would go downstairs to look at this painting, and it really moved me in some way that I can't explain, but it is a quite fascinating painting that some tragedy can happen in such a bucolic, serene way. And so I thought maybe my painting of this art museum that's on fire is really doing the same thing, because it's so quiet, it almost puts you to sleep. And yet it's got blazing flames engulfing this building, and yet the rest of the picture is really can put you asleep. And I like that idea. This kind of soft lawn out and back that it's just like combinations of life examples that you put together in a picture.
I love the way the smoke is coming out of the atrium there. Okay, next. And next, this was a comparison that you wanted to talk about a little bit.
Well, this is a little drawing. I didn't know much about it until I saw it in a book regarding the Dada art movement, and this was in there, and it again confounded me. I bet you Marcel Duchamp would love this work and probably even saw it, and you could rapturize yourself on this picture just because of all the elements in it. And it looks like, to me, just some confounding picture making technique that incorporates clumsiness with the ink at the bottom dripping down the page, and these beetles that are all in an orderly fashion, almost like a horse race at the starting gate. And it also appears to me like almost like a musical graph. I always like what Captain Beefheart, they asked him, what is music? And he said, black ants on white paper. Black ants on white paper. And to me, that's a little bit like what this is doing. You get almost like it could be, you could make music out of this if you stretched your imagination. The one on the right is a painting that I did, which I consider my Beatles painting. And very faintly and with skinny lines all over are these top view of parked cars.
What kind of car is that? Do you know?
I'd say it's a Chevy or a Ford.
Okay. I love the comparison. I wonder, you mentioned Saul LeWitt earlier. I wonder if he liked that Bargeld drawing too. It's got the grid, but also the beetles sort of are in formation. Some of them are just not complete, and seems to be um, in his spirit. Next slide. Well, I think we're almost done. We won't impose on you, all of you, too much longer, but there's two very interesting Arthur Dove paintings in town here, and I know you're very fond of the painting at the Phillips, Going Fishing, 1925. We have painting Rain from the previous year, in which Dove was being very radical and experimental with his materials.
So yeah, when I first saw Arthur Dove's work, it was his abstract paintings, which are around the turn of the century, I guess. And he seemed to me like maybe one of the earliest people to paint totally abstract pictures. And then I saw that later on here in 1925, he's done this picture, and I really consider Arthur Dove an American original. And the way this is like some quick response. If he probably sat down and said, "What is fishing?" And then, "What is fishing? I got to make a picture out of this." And so naturally you fish with a bamboo pole, and you have, your Levi's have got tears in them, and you've got all this other stuff. And, but I have a particular fondness for this picture. And I've also visited this before at the Phillips collection.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about Rain. That's a complete new one to me, but there's also, you got the same thing happening.
Yeah, very
He's a
much.
very interesting artist.
Yeah. The Phillips picture is up now. They've reinstalled their collection, and you said it's a kind of a classic American picture, and apparently the original title had the N word in it, as did several of Dove's paintings, and so there's kind of a dark underside to the work as well that's starting to come out.
Know that. So you learn something every day.
Yeah.
But anyway, Going Fishing came about during the Roaring '20s. So here it is, and I just found it to be a really interesting picture. It's almost like a picture inside a box. Like there's a drop back to it that has a shadow on it, and so it might even be. I mean, it is a kind of a sculptural painting with three-dimensional objects, and collage, the idea of taking something and putting it into a picture, like Kurt Schwitters would walk around the streets and pick up, trolley transfers and say, "Let's make something out of this." And this is an extension of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Our painting, I can tell you, has layers of glass and metal and glue, and it's very much an object. Next slides. So is it possible that work by Dove inspired you to put all these fishing poles in your paintings over the years?
Well, I think maybe he softened me up to the idea of a bamboo pole. And I like the bamboo pole idea, that it's something long and skinny, and that it's got its own elasticity to it, and it's so it can be a storytelling element that I would use in different ways. And I haven't seen these four pictures together, but I'm kind of bamboo crazy here.
I just grabbed as many as I could. Next slide. So
yeah, August Strindberg. Now he's also painted abstract pictures. I mean, he's better known as a playwright, but he did some very interesting paintings. But
yeah, and I should say here that I put the caption in the wrong place. The Strindberg is on the left.
Is there any way of scooting that over, because we can't truly see what this picture on the left is? What the limits of this picture.
Yeah.
Is there any way of scooching that over some way?
I doubt it. I can see the whole thing, but it is a vertical painting with those three registers. but I'm afraid that it is a little bit
But
far
now
over there.
this mountain scene with the blue sky back there, is that his painting?
No, so I'm messing with you here, and I just took a screenshot off the Paramount, trailer, because I know that you've been taken with that image, those kinds of images from the movie studios, and I just thought the Strindberg reminded me of it. It's a craggy painting, and yet I can't believe that. I mean, you have such breadth, and you like a painting that has it's such a thick painting, the Strindberg. It's so
Yeah.
expressionist, and it's palpable, and then you've got in your own work with mountains, it's a they're very cool, and they're like images, screenshots. In fact, if we go to the next slide, can we go to the next slide? This is a painting that I lived with at the Fog Art Museum, one of your wonderful mountain paintings. So you don't paint anything like Strindberg, but you love Strindberg. What do you love about that?
Well, I like his impasto business with his paintings, and the fact that they're so non-objective. And now here I'm just back on my street idea where I've taken an aerial view of streets in Los Angeles and superimposing on some idea of a mountain, not any particular mountain, because I'm not like Albert Bierstadt, who goes out into the forest and sets his canvas up. This is more like an idea of a mountain rather than a mountain.
Yeah.
And the mystery of the foggy business happening there is something else.
Yes, a little smog maybe on the
Could be.
lower right. It reminds me of the painting from the Venice Commission with the graffiti and that sky with those veils of color. Yeah. And this is all hand painted, correct?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And you've done a lot of these.
I guess.
Yeah. The next slide. So we're wrapping up here, and your most recent show at Gagosian in New York, you turned partly to the image of the American flag. And here are 3 examples. And the next slide, taking a closer look at your treatment of the flag. And, we started with Course of Empire and talking about the rise and fall of cultures and nations, or at least the changes. And I wonder whether you're returning to that topic.
I don't know, but you could read that into it, couldn't you?
I guess I just did.
That's all right with me. There's a million ways to interpret a million different paintings. So that's the whole mystery of it all. And so you just try to move forward.
Yeah. Well, you always make us look at things differently in a way we've never looked at them before. And you're doing that again. And I again see, people in the chat saying, is that crop? Well, yes and no. Cropping is part of the revisioning of the environment. And I think there might be 1 or 2 more slides. Here, an earlier American flag painting of yours, in which part of your series of redactions where you've removed or pretended to remove a text, which we then learn about in the title.
Yeah, I could look upon these as though and call these things like dumb blocks or censor strips And then, I mean, the painting is one thing. That the title is entirely different. I'm kind of investigating this hackneyed idea of Native American dialect, like plenty big hotel room. Isn't that the way Native American is supposed to speak English in the old days, in the old movie?
Yeah.
And so that concept is comes together in this picture.
Yeah. It becomes a very pointed and critical painting, or you could read it that way. And I'm guilty of that. Next. So just ending up here with a couple of great artists treating the American flag. And both of these artists, very important to you, right?
Oh yeah, especially Robert Frank. Well, Jasper also, and I do believe that Jasper's. They asked him about this painting, and he said the one thing that disrupts his thinking or makes him wonder is that he thinks people are too preoccupied or busy knowing that that's an American flag, and I like his thinking on that. And it's probably true. And Robert Frank, he of course, his book on the Americans was like a blockbuster for me. It was very explosive in its energy, and I began to recognize that he probably observed America better than most Americans because he didn't live in America. He was from Switzerland. Coming from Switzerland to America with innocent eyes and a camera, and then he begins to investigate what this country's all about. And that book was powerful to me and a lot of other people too when it came out in 1958 or something, 57.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you got to know Robert Frank quite
Yes.
well. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Just talking about cropping, I mean, this Frank image is full of it, the way the flag is cropped and the figures, and that really carries an emotional charge.
Powerhouse pictures.
Yes, yes. Next slide. Well, I think probably every Ed Ruscha conversation ends with this image. It was a no-brainer. Another one from our collection, in which is this about the movies again?
I guess it is, and I always liked little blips and Durzels and tweebs and mistakes and things. But I, at the same time, realized that in years to come, like possibly in another 5 or 10 years, young people growing up, they'll be looking at these pictures saying, well, what are all those little marks in there? Because movies no longer have marks or scratches. And so these pictures are going to begin to maybe lose their direct interpretation, their importance, because what they're illustrating is something that no longer exists.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They might not be able to read that Gothic newspaper typeface either.
That also.
Yeah. Well, you've taken us back to our sort of theme about passage of time, change, and entropy, and what's lost and what's gained. And I took a lot of your time, almost an hour and a half. I think we don't have time for questions. I tried to answer a few of the questions as they popped up. I'm sorry I didn't get to too many of them. But I just want to thank Ed Ruscha for giving us so much to look at and think about and imagine saying, tasting, smelling, words, pictures over all these years. And it's been my honor to get to know you and get to know your work. So we love you here at the National Gallery. We're sorry you couldn't come in person, but that invitation is open.
Okay, Harry. So next time you get in the car, buckle up. How about it?
I do. All right. Thank you.